Welcome back. You're listening to the English language program on RTCI. My guest is Dr. Michael Ayari. Michael holds a PhD from the University of Aix-en-Provence in political science from 2002 to 2008. He worked on the commitment in authoritarian regime, leftist and Islamist opponents in independent Tunisia. And he's going to talk about an article recently published by the International Crisis Group. Welcome to RTCI.
Welcome.
I guess it's very hard for you to speak in English. I know you're supposed to speak in
No, it's
my
not so
colleagues in
hard.
French, but this is the advantage of the new generation of Tunisian experts. They speak English, French, they have no problem, and Arabic as well. So my first question is about the International Crisis Group. How do you present the International Crisis Group to our listeners?
Yes, for those who don't know, International Crisis Group, it's ICG, it's an independent and a non-profit and non-governmental organization.
Mm-hmm.
It was founded in 1995. The purpose of this organization is to prevent and resolve deadly conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was founded just after the problems in Rwanda and in Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose was to understand the signs of deadly conflict and when they started, try to manage them thanks to inclusive dialogue. And there are more than 100 people employed, present in 70 countries. And all these people have a background, sometimes academics or sometimes experienced journalists, and they are neither too close and neither too far from the country, the problem inside the country, so they can put things into perspective and to understand as well what signs of deadly conflict can be seen.
From 2002 to 2008, you worked on the commitment in authoritarian regime, leftist and Islamist opponents in independent Tunisia. About 5 years ago, you did not know that things were going to change in Tunisia. But as if you were working on this issue in 2013. We do have this problem nowadays.
What kind of problem?
The problem of this challenge, or this challenge of the new Tunisia, of the existence of two different groups of people. In the past, they had just one enemy, one regime, leftist and Islamist. They had just one regime, but things have changed, and today, their enemy left the country. They are free. They can run the country, but as if they were entering a kind of war, an open war between leftists and Islamists in Tunisia.
Yes, it's a long problem, this question. I work on this issue, so as you told, from 2001. And the purpose was to understand how people take risks in a society like Tunisia, because it was authoritarian regime, and how do they take risk to make a political commitment? Why? Was it linked to familial disposals? You know, is it linked to university? What kind of political socialization do they have? And the hypothesis was that it was like a cycle of protests. It was in the 60s there was leftist, in 70s there was leftist and Islamist too, and after, during the 80s, it was more Islamist. And if there were confrontations, there is a kind of passage de relais between both, and the same circumstances that make a leftist during the 60s made an Islamist during the 80s, and I didn't want to oppose these two movements. If they are different goals, different purpose, we see that it's in a university. In universities that people are recruited. And now what we can see, it's sometimes these people, which who were not very known in Tunisia, nobody knew them, but though they are very famous. They have Guignol, for example, marionette, all that stuff. And often these people act as if they were in university, because they learn politics at university.
And they didn't practice for more than 20 years or 30 years. They were in exile or in jail.
There was a politics, but it was more human rights, defending human rights, political prisoners. But the political socialization, as we said in sociology, was inside the campus. Campus were almost free spaces. And campus people tend to exaggerate the problems, and sometimes they have a conflict, long conflict between leftists and Islamists. They try to solve it sometimes in the public space in Tunisia. And it's very funny for a person who knows this history, or for old activists, you know, who know that.
Actually, this is a very good analysis, an interesting analysis. So they are acting as if they were at university. Is this the result?
The result of what? Sorry.
They are acting as if they were still at university.
We can say that it's
they are not mature enough.
We can say that because it's a judgment, but we can say that in university it's everything is existential, you know, because you have to gain control of a space, you know, and sometimes you have your enemy, you exaggerate things, and sometimes you don't have a dialogue, you know, with people. And sometimes that you have a strike, you have to control the strike, you have to say that sometimes there are just 50 people inside the university were on strike, and you say that this is the beginning of the revolution, you know, something like that.
You're describing Tunisia in 2030. So I want to ask you about your article, Tunisia Violence and the Salafi Challenge. We are not targeting a group of people here in Tunisia. We are just going to talk about an article and to discuss this article. So for the people who are listening to us on TCE, we are not targeting people. We are just analyzing, trying to understand what is going on in the country. So what about this article, Tunisia, Violence and the Salafi Challenge?
Just a precision, it's not just an article, it's a report.
It's more than that, it's a report.
It's a report, it's 50 pages. For the moment they are just in French, but it is to be translated in 3 or 4 weeks, we hope so. And it's the fourth report of International Crisis Group on Tunisia. The first was about the uprising of 2010. The second one was called Tunisia Combating Impunity and Restoring Security. It was about the transitional justice and reform inside the Ministry of the Interior. And the other one was about economic challenges. The title was Confronting Social and Economic Challenges. It has been published in June. And this is the fourth. So we started it in June 2012. So 7 months more, and we meet more than 100 and 150 persons, including lots of Salafists, jihadi Salafists, people from forces de sécurité, you know, security forces, and people from all over the country, inside regions, who travel inside regions to have a global
perspective
overview. So this report, why? Because in June we wanted to understand. It was before Abdeliyah, before the events of
Abdeliyah. Yes.
I wanted to understand what was the alterations of Islamism, you know, in Tunisia, because we said it's not the same thing that under Ben Ali, you know, and something was happening. There was a new mediatic stigmata, you know, Salafist, and the term Salafist tend to replace the term Islamist during the 80s, you know. It was a negative terms politically speaking, and a positive terms theologically speaking, you know.
Yeah, I see.
And we wanted to understand what's happening, and especially how Nahda dealt with these Salafis. You know, we are kind of more radical point of view, you know, and tends to look like Islamists of the 80s, you know, like in Algeria, something like that. But with new stance. There were no Al Qaeda, there were no like the FIS in Algeria, not like Nagda. It was something new.
No revolutions as well.
We cannot say revolution
because they uprising. They changed the equation in the region.
Yeah,
Salafism or probably Islamism in the 80s and the 90s was different because there were rulers in these regions.
Yes, of course, but it's not just the term Salafist is not enough to describe this kind of contestation.
You know what? We'll have a short break with music.
Okay.
We'll be back in about 4 minutes. You have the opportunity to explain, okay, and to give us an idea about the rise of Salafism in Tunisia and in the region in general. Stay with us. Mikhail, how do you explain the rise of Salafism in Tunisia in the post-revolution period?
Before to understand the rise in the post-revolution period, we have to understand the rise before this period.
The origin, the roots.
It's mean under Ben Ali. We have to say that under Ben Ali, we didn't use the term Salafist. There was not this kind of protest terminology. It was during, that from 1994, Nava was totally eradicated from Tunisia.
From the political scene, yeah.
And the officer of the force de sécurité said there was Khwanjia. It means fréris, people belongs to the confrérie of Muslim Brotherhood. They said that, and it's just before 911 and after 911 that a new kind of contestation, of protestation, which was not Khwanjia, and which was not seen as dangerous as Khwanjia, emerged in Tunisia. And first, this kind of protestation, it emerged in Europe. In immigration, it emerged everywhere,
in
Tunisia, and it was a kind of coming back to a kind of austere identity, identity like that. But paradoxically, it was more modern and less political than the Khwanji. And it was that people called scientific Salafism, and it was more identitarian than politic. And it was we could see that in TV channels, from the Gulf and Egyptian channel and Saudi channels. And what we have to say, what favorised the emergence of this identity was the fact that Ben Ali had the same language than George Bush. It means that there was an anti-terrorist law from 2003, and what George Bush said, it was exactly what Ben Ali said.
Really?
It was exactly the same.
Do you think this favors the rise?
War against terrorism, a war against people with birds, all that stuff. And in the mind of people, there was a kind of identitarian trouble, because they say, okay, we are here, but they see on TV the Iraq question with the exactions of American army, and there was the problem of Afghanistan, and people they wanted to protest with what was free, because there was a kind of emptiness of the public space, of the religious space, of political space, and what was left, what was the only free spaces, what they see on TV. And it was the fact of, it was a new kind of Islamism, and it was more like imaginary. It was a jihadist imaginary. People who were arrested in Tunisia, there was more than 2,000 people arrested, young, especially youth. They were arrested, but there was not a kind of jihadist. It was people who shared this kind of...
They were fascinated.
Fascinated, exactly. And
by an idea.
The regime with its anti-terrorist law didn't make the difference between people young who see a site, an internet site...
And people who are really criminals.
Exactly. So sometimes people were fascinated with Ben Laden, but like in the 60s, they was fascinated with Che Guevara, all that stuff. But there was at the same time real terrorist network in Tunisia. Especially we went in Iraq, and there was this kind of the complexity. It means that on the one hand, the regime let this kind of identitarian protestation, and on the other end, he attacked to every signs of this kind of religiosity. So there was lots of contradiction, and after the revolution. When Ben Ali
fled the country
away, what happened? There was the kind of amnesty, of, and I think that more than 1,500 people seen as Salafists,
and people were released.
There were people who came back from exile.
Yeah, that's what you talk about in your article, the eventual return of jihadis from abroad.
Exactly. And there was a new religious space that emerged, and there was especially the question of taking position in popular corner, the quartiers populaires,
and popular neighborhoods,
and stuff, And it has changed because when we see Salafism, violent Salafism, there are different kind of Salafism. We said, and it's the main message, of our report, is to say that we must provide differentiated answer to different kind of problem. First, there is the marginalization of young citizens, for whom Salafism and sometimes violence is an easy way out, and it's more like identitarian problems, the fact of being a youth in a society when you don't have purchase power, when you are excluded from everywhere, and when you understand that your religious belief is not enough to gain control of your life.
Are you basically talking about the situation in France?
In France. What do you mean?
In France, in Europe, in North America,
There was this kind of...
which societies are you talking about?
Tunisia.
Tunisia.
Yes, I speak of Tunisia. It means that these people, how could I say that? I mean that...
Is it the same situation for our youth who came after the revolution and who were raised in Europe, basically in Europe?
Yeah, yes, it was not exactly the same. What can I say? When I say the religious belief, I mean that you're here in a society, okay, and there is too much social pressure to be an individual. It means to live like modern, to live, for example, your sexuality or something like that. There's too much social pressure. There is a problem between tradition and modernity.
Yeah, it's clear.
So you take on the surface, you know, on appearance, you take the fact that it's the more traditional. Okay, to say to the society, okay, I'm traditional, so you don't have nothing to say, okay, but at the same time, you leave your individuality,
Yeah.
but hidden, you know, and this is this kind of, it was a
dilemma.
Exactly, it was a dilemma, and it was the fact of resolving the contradiction, and it was more identitarian than politic, you know. And under Ben Ali, it was the same thing. They say, okay, there are these young people who with the bird, okay, they are criminals, and the fact of seeing people as criminals,
They were oppressed, and they reacted.
Exactly. So we have to, you know, to understand that they are a problem, but now they are different kind, and then there is now a jihadi threat.
Yeah, actually, we'll talk about the jihadi threat in Tunisia and the conference of Prime Minister Ali Al-Rayed. We'll just have a short break with music. Zukiro feels like a woman. It's a different context, so enjoy. Stay with us. This group. Doctor, do you believe Tunisian Salafists have a role to play in post-revolution Tunisia? They were rejected and oppressed in the past, and they claim their right. What's the role of politicians, the media, and the civil society? They have a different vision of Tunisia, but they are Tunisian at the end.
Oh. Yes, of course. Because there is a...
How are we supposed to deal?
To deal, the first thing is to make the differentiation between the different kinds. If you use Salafi, it means we put different realities into the
same,
you know,
same box. Yeah, to be careful. To be careful.
We have to be careful. The fact that it was with Nahda, because Nahda had used a kind of soft power, you know, with Salafis, and 4 people of Nahda we met. And they say that with time it's just a temporary phenomenon, you know, this kind of radicalization of religious discourse, you know. And at the end they will be integrated, and they want to integrate them inside the political system in order to moderate them. Because it does the same thing that happened a little bit with Muslim Brotherhood, you know.
Do you think another
did this? Once you become visible, you have to give account to what you do.
Sure.
You know? And without wanting it, you enter into a kind of cycle that makes you more reformist, and less revolutionary, as you prefer. So it's a kind of gamble, because the other people who are opposed to this strategy, they say that it's a risky gamble because it will hasten societies from a kind of gradual Islamization from below. Because if they want to integrate them and not to fight them, they have to give them concessions. And this kind of concessions for these people, it's what they call the Wahhabization of mosques, of the society. And I met lots of people who said that in 2 or in 10 years we'll be like Saudi Arabia, you know, with a rigorous Islam everywhere, and that we have our identity here, it's totally different. You know, we have the Zitouna, we have a reformist, Tunisian reformist, and a kind of patrimoine identitaire and culturel. And the fact that what happened in Tunisia was pretty different than in Egypt, you know. In Egypt there was a gathering of all scientific Salafists inside Hizb al-Nour, you know, the party Hizb al-Nour. In Tunisia now there are several parties that appear, but which are not Salafists, in fact. We have Hizb Tahrir. Media said they are Salafis. They are not Salafis.
It's not true. Yeah.
They are Muslim Brotherhood that made a scission, you know, of Muslim Brotherhood during the 50s. You know, we have 2 necro parties like Asala and Rahma. We are not Salafist like that, and we have Mohamed Khouja from Jabhat al-Islah. And Mohamed Khouja is not Salafist too. He was a person from the FIT, the Front Islamique Tunisien. He said, okay, we follow the pious ancestor, you know, but he said he's Salafist in the theological term, but not in politics. They are more like right wing at the right of Nahda, you know. So it's different. But what appears in Tunisia, and it's different than Egypt, it's this kind of youth and popular Salafism-oriented contestation, and it's more an urban and youth movement, and it is important to say that there is a kind of a break, there is a fossé, a break between a part of the youth in Tunisia and the politics. And sometimes these people who don't have perspective, they see that there is a transition, there are political transactions with elite. They see that they are excluded.
They are not concerned.
They are not concerned. It was the same thing of people who were in the stadium, with Ultra, all these people who did the revolution. And now we have people that they say, okay, we are here to defend Islam. The fact of defending Islam is a kind of wall, a wall that prevent themselves from the recuperation of elites. They prevent them from speaking the language of what they see as secular elites, who don't defend.
This is why they speak different language.
They say that, but sometimes they say the same thing. I meet people who say, okay, we're for equality, we're for that, but they use they don't have the same political discourse. They use it with theological one, but sometimes they want the same thing, And if you say, okay, you're Salafist, you're the bad one,
you accuse them.
So
the solution is probably just to listen to people who have different vision of the political scene in Tunisia. Including the different kinds of Salafist groups.
Yeah, and it's very difficult, especially in this time of polarization, of cleavage, because people react with emotion.
Yeah.
And we don't have time, to put things to perspective. Okay, we are the bad, we are the good.
You're good, yeah. Left or right,
and
black or white.
Violence, non-violence. There are extremists, religious extremists, and moderate ones. And it's pretty different.
Doctor, since you're talking about extremism and violence, Amal is asking you on Facebook. She says, "I'd like to ask Dr. Ayari, what do you think is the best way to deal with Salafism in Tunisia, notably violent Salafism, with regard to their right for freedom of expression and the rule of law that has to be applied to everyone at the same time?"
I'll not answer directly, but just to answer in a different manner, I said that the most important thing to avoid for us, it's simply to say that it's a vicious cycle. It means an intensified repression and a Salafi radicalization, and this is the main thing true, because we saw sign before the assassination of Shokri Belhid of a kind of radicalization on the one hand, and the other hand a different treatment of Salafism.
Do you believe intensified repression is taking place in Tunisia?
It means that it's.
Are there signs of intensified repression against the Salafist movement?
Is as there are lots of administrative disorder in Tunisia. In fact, it's true. It's administrative.
It's a fact.
Inside the state.
It's a fact.
So there are not been real reforms. There are lots of blockage, inside administration, security, and justice. People have the feeling that or there is nothing. It's a kind of laxism.
Oh, there's repression.
Or total harsh repression with, with all that stuff. But they don't have this,
no middle ground.
This vision. And it's a part what? Because sometimes we have to say it. At the local level, there are dialogue, persuasion, cooptation that neither use with Salafists, and sometimes there are common interest at the local level, especially in Sfax, for example. And there are other way. It means that as Nava don't act as Ben Ali, they are seen as laxist. And as people sometimes look, there is a security problem. I met lots of policemen, from in Menzel Bourguiba, all that stuff inside the country. They say we don't act against Salafism because we don't feel we are protected inside our function. They want a new juridical framework.
Yeah.
For example, and this is the all that is it means it's linked to the transition period. We are in a kind of emptiness, juridical emptiness, constitutional emptiness, and that make that when there are problems, they cannot be managed and solved so easily
by the security forces. Actually, the question is about this the solution to this problem, because it's not easy to avoid repression, the intensified repression, and at the same time to apply the law in Tunisia. It's very difficult for police agents who are not trained to just apply the law and avoid intensified repression. Things are changing, but it's too slow.
Yeah.
We could probably have a short break with music.
Okay.
We'll be back in about 2 minutes, so stay with us. Dr. Michael, I want to ask you about the recommendations of the International Crisis Group about the rise of Salafism and the security situation in Tunisia in the post-revolution era.
Yeah, yes, we have 12 recommendations. First, the philosophy of this recommendation is to say that we have to separate social, demographic, urban, political, and religious causes of violence.
I see.
The first one, so we formulate a recommendation to tackle the immediate crisis after the death of Shokri Belihid. It was to establish a national council for dialogue, comprising the main political and civil societies organizations as well as trade unions to agree on a clear roadmap for the next stages of the transition. After to tackle the social roots of violence, it's very important to encourage the cooperation between Salafist, Islamist and secularist associations of organizations.
Do you think it's possible?
Level. It's possible, I think so.
Really?
Because look, if you are in a for example neighborhood, underprivileged regions of neighborhood, you say okay, we have we just want to améliorer. To improve la vie quotidienne, the quotidian life, you know, of the quartier, for example. And you can do things like that with small purposes, little purposes, and really realistic. We have this kind of associative forum that happened in Egypt when there was the problem of Jama al-Islami, all that stuff. So I think it's possible. And after, what is needed, it's a kind of policies designed to provide social, economic support for young residents of this poor neighborhood, and focusing especially on educational and professional opportunities.
To encourage civil society activists.
Exactly, but because it's the dropout from school or from job that makes sometimes people receptive to this kind of violences. And after there are recommendations to Nahda, to the Nahda,
the ruling party.
It's the fact that they have to be clear about their religious identity.
What do you mean by clear about their religious identity?
It means that they have to say what kind of religious stance they defend. Is this an Islam rooted in Tunisian reformist movement and adapted to contemporary challenge, or is sometimes very vague, like a populist one, like a half a mix of Wahhabism, of a mix of everything, you know? Like, is it the need? I think so, because they used to say that before the revolution, during the 80s and the 90s, it was very clear. They say, okay, we are in the leg of Zitouna, of Tunisia, and they should promote this kind of Islam, you know, that is a part of Tunisian identity. They have to promote that in their publications, encourage associations with close ties to...
Do you believe it's not the case?
Pardon?
Do you think it's not the case?
I don't think so, because...
Why?
Because they are divided. Nahda is divided, I think, between politicals and preachers. And there are these preachers, there are people who were in exile, there are people who were in jail, and there was a kind of superficial Salafization of Muslim Brotherhood all over the world. And it means that sometimes, there is a kind of a contradiction inside Nahda. It means that preachers tend to resemble,
look like
Salafists. And the political, they
look like moderates.
Exactly, they are criticized inside the party. To say,
from within the party.
From within the party, and everybody is criticized. Sometimes people who are frustrated inside the party, they formulate their frustration in Salafist language, for example. You know, and this is very important.
We saw this at the assembly.
Because people didn't have time to speak in Nahda. Nahda is 40 years of existence, okay, but it has never had the time to develop into a democratic area, democratic epoch.
Actually, it was not allowed.
And now inside they try to privilege fraction, the expression of dissensus of different point of view inside, but they are very centralist, and sometimes they don't have discussions. We have people in Nahda who defend the MTI, Itija al-Islami from the 80s. We have people who are almost like Salafis. You have people who are totally post-Islamist like Erdogan, and they are not inside, for example, program of formation inside
Don't you
Nahda.
think this is probably an advantage of having different political affiliations, different visions of the society within the same party, or it might be perceived as a negative aspect? Because it does not reflect the real identity, the unique identity of the political party, the ruling political party in Tunisia.
You know, when we say that, I don't say that the solution is to be homogeneous, you know, homogeneity.
One color, or black or white.
But when there is this kind of blur, everything is blur, everybody can accuse you of a triple
discourse. Yeah, it's the case. It's the case.
So you say what you want. When you speak with people, you say we are Islamists, so we are for Sharia, we are for the thing. You speak with another, you say no, you know, Sharia for us is not to cut hands. Sharia is the way of seeing life and democracy and development.
And you call this double discourse? You call this double discourse?
It's not, because every politic have a double discourse. You know, everybody, even leftists, everyone have a double discourse. But here in Nada, the difference between classical parties, you know, typical party, there is a part of religious. They are haraka, the movement, and they have a party.
Yeah.
So, you know, they can use really religiosity, you know, to every end.
And actually they haven't solved this dilemma between the party and the haraka, the movement.
Exactly, but the problem, if they take position, they don't want to cut themselves to a potential social base that can vote for them. You know?
So it's a challenge for another party to change.
Exactly. I think that is a challenge. And the last, sorry, I just finished because it's almost there. We have a recommendation about security. If we don't have to exaggerate the Salafi threat, we don't have to minimize it, because there are problems of jihadists, there are circulation of weapons, you know, everywhere in Tunisia. And we said that
smuggling of arms from Libya.
Exactly. So the Justice and Interior Ministries should implement programs to provide consistent law enforcement training, provide modern non-lethal crowd control equipment to the police and National Guard. It is very important. Compile a list of areas most at risk of violence and require medical police of proximity. It could be very important. The Tunisia's international partners, notably France, Italy, Germany, and the US, should establish exchange and training program for law enforcement officer and providing financial backing for the modernization and improvement of non-lethal crowd control equipment. And at the end, Tunisia and Libya, Algerian governments,
yeah, that's the most
they have to ensure greater security cooperation and even improving intelligence coordination in borders areas. There is a big problem and a big threat at this moment, so it's not the same.
Yeah,
the threat,
it's a regional challenge, not only Tunisian challenge.
Exactly, because people are not the same. It's not because there is a kind sometimes vigilantism in popular areas that is the same thing that people with guns, you know, on frontiers linked to ACME and all that stuff. And it is very important. So security is important and social action is important too.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming. The video of this interview will be available on my Facebook page, RTC, the English language program. Thank you very much for your comments and your feedback on my Facebook page. The news update in French and the German language program are next. Monsieur Flabiev is here. I want to thank my friend and colleague, the maestro, Sonia Hadioui, for her valuable technical assistance. Until we meet again, I'm Adnen Chaouachi. Stay tuned to the best radio in Tunisia. Stay tuned to RTC. Bye. Bravo.
Impeccable. Merci à toi, bonne question.
Bravo.